Welcome back to the Rock and Roll Show with an international feast of rugby. Dom and I have decided to make our glorious return with the Junior World Championship and of course the Nations Championship on. Dom, how have you been?
I've been really well, thank you, mate. Enjoying this heat, on a couple of holidays, just soaking up some sun. But it's nice to still have had a bit of rugby going on, after all the club rugby finished and everybody won the accolades. It's still nice that something's going on, and especially international rugby and this new tournament, of course, with the Nations Championship.
You've been out in Marrakesh, I believe, wasn't it?
Yeah, did a little bit of holidaying with some uni mates, which was very nice. A lovely little bit of time to relax, and now just gearing up to get going again with the champ season. The fixtures just got announced again today, and also, of course, both of us are off to our respective universities to do some more qualifications.
Spend a bit more money, get ourselves into more debt there. That's gonna be lovely. Can't wait to do that. But as you mentioned, that Nations Championship, and this is the inaugural Nations Championship that has got underway last weekend. But yeah, that's the feast of rugby, as I alluded to. New Zealand getting Dave Rennie's first game underway with a 34-32 victory over France. Japan shocking Italy. Italy going early into the lead in that game, but Japan fighting back and beating them 27 points to 10. Big victory for them. Ireland clinching it at the death, 33-31, and a late Ben Donaldson missed penalty in that game broke Aussie hearts. Wales getting off to a flying start. They're actually top of the Northern Hemisphere table, who could believe it, with a 39-24 away win in Cardiff at the Cardiff City Stadium. I'm sure I'll get your thoughts on that in a minute, Dom. Of course, South Africa 45-21 against England in Johannesburg and Ellis Park. And then to round off the day, you thought the action might have petered out. Absolutely no chance. Argentina 38, Scotland 47. A very impressive victory for Gregor Townsend's side. I guess we'll start in with the first sort of main talking point of, as an England fan, I feel like I must go to it first. Where are England at?
God knows. I mean, there was never much hope going into this game beforehand from anybody, really, from any England fan. I mean, the hope there was obviously for the South Africans and that they would easily win this. One taking point, it wasn't a 50 pointer from them, so take small victories, but to go down 17-0 within, God, how long? Well, it wasn't very long at all, was it? It was like the first 20 minutes at least. It wasn't good, and it was looking like it might be a bit of a trouncing. Second half, end of the second half, the tries, that was quite nice, but yeah, you can't deal with South Africa, and it's a tough one to have straight off the bat because it's a game that, as I say, you're obviously going to not get the result in, but nonetheless, the performance still wasn't there. The backline choices were pretty wrong, to put it bluntly. I thought the forward packs were was very strong, and they managed South Africa fairly well. I think set piece could have been a little bit better, but I'm starting to reignite the Borthwick out chance. That's what I'll say at the end of that.
Well, that's the big fat elephant in the room, Dom, quite frankly. I think heading into this one, it was always going to be backs against the wall, heading to Joburg at altitude. A lot was made of that, alongside, I guess, the Football World Cup where you had England also playing at altitude. So it was not quite an interesting sort of comparison there. They managed a little bit better with it. But going into this one, what was the expectation for you? I know you were saying Borthwick out there, but to sort of challenge you on that, what was the expectation for this game for England off the back of that Six Nations to come in, first game back? And, how close would you have wanted them to get? Would you have expected them to win? I know you said you didn't expect them to win it, but, what do you think they needed to improve on specifically?
The Six Nations was obviously quite a frustrating tournament as an England fan because started off well against Wales, but equally it was Wales, so we should have started out quite strongly. And then it just kind of went very downhill very quickly with the losses against Scotland, against Ireland, against Italy. And then that final game when we played against France, it was like we have remembered how to play rugby. And I think what people are wanting is for them to have carried that momentum on, carry that performance on. And so there was a little bit of hope that we can still play very well against the top teams. And although as I say, we weren't expecting to beat South Africa, the game plan just still didn't seem like it was there. There's still far too much kicking. There's not kind of that pivotal person in that backline who's really calling the shots. It's everybody's kind of looking for someone else to make the decisions. And I think that is, as I say, I think that is the big thing that is missing in England's go forward and execution, because we should be scoring more than 3 tries in a game, and that's bonus points should always just be the absolute bare minimum, I think, in this kind of standard. But again, as well, to on the flip side, to let them to leak as many points as we did wasn't ideal either. But again, you're playing against the best team in the world with one of the best backlines in the world as well. So take the small wins where we can. And as I say, it wasn't 50, so that's better than something. But yeah, it just feels very lax. I think the wrong decisions are being made. And as I say, and particularly in that back line, and I just don't think there's that leadership that there really needs to be.
So moving into that Fiji game then, Dom, Fiji disappointed, I would imagine, not getting a victory against Wales, having beaten them last season, and with the rise of Fijian rugby. How do England manage this Fiji team, and what sort of different selection would you make if you were Steve Borthwick?
I think if they play how like they did against Wales, they'll just come out the blocks firing, kind of look to just batter at the start. And Wales in their game against them were quite standoffish in that first half, especially. They looked very scared, as I say. So I think the way that England can deal with this is kind of soak up that pressure and that hard-hittingness that they will inevitably bring in that first hour, in that first half. And then when it comes to bringing on the subs, you need to bring on a bit of pace. Henry Pollock will be perfect in that instance, because if you try and start him, he's just going to get absolutely knocked off the park and be, dead to the world by the time it comes to the 60th minute. So, yeah, I think hard hitters soaking up that pressure to begin with, and then, as I say, bring on a bit of pace, change it up a little bit, go for a bit, maybe a 5-3 split on the bench rather than the usual 6-2 that they've been using, and just, create spaces, create chances for ourselves, and don't be afraid to play through the backs.
Do you think it's a game in that where it's more up to England to put on a really good performance, work on the shape, work on, start to build some partnership? I mean, the centre partnerships has been a lot of discussion around that, and the amount of different ones that they've had. I think there's nearly 10 in the last 30 games or something like that. Is there more emphasis on that, or is it getting the result, maybe going to your set piece like Wales did, and, as you say, getting those hard hitters on and shutting down Fiji before they get the opportunity? I mean, 32 offloads they had in the last game, 20 more than any other side in the first round. What do you think is the priority for England?
I think, like you say, the centre partnership is definitely something that needs to be honed in and solidified, because a couple of years ago there was no doubt in anybody's mind that it was going to be Slade and Lawrence in the centre partnership, and it just worked really well. The two of them had a very good partnership going, and it still baffles me that Henry Slade hasn't really been in the squad recently, because he's got such a good boot on him. He's very relaxed under pressure, and he's probably one of those heads that people will turn to and be able to look at and to kind of dictate what's going to happen next in the game. What he needs then alongside him is someone, that heavy hitter, that's someone who loves the contact. And I think Janssen van Rensburg, kind of Ollie Lawrence again, would be perfect for that. Seb Atkinson, I do like and rate as a player, but it's just his lack of international experience that is against him at the minute. But kind of these games against Fiji are those the perfect opportunities to boost that for a player like him. So I wouldn't necessarily be disappointed to see him again, but I just think he needs to be alongside someone with a bit more experience as well. Not having one of the world's best wingers in the world, Tommy Freeman, coming in and playing out of position. Like, that whole scenario is just still really irking me at the moment. But yeah, like you say, if they've got some hard-hitting players who can kind of, soak Fiji, not let them wriggle around too much, because they'll force their own errors as well. As many offloads as they can do, it doesn't always go right, and so England can be patient in those times. That's when they can kind of recover, and then when it's time, then they can attack with speed.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, let's see if will carry out that way. It's not always so simple against Fiji. They tend to throw the game plans out of the window quite a bit. But moving on to South Africa and their opponents this weekend, they face Scotland with a much changed side, with quite a few Bulls coming back into the back line. In particular, you've got Ambrose Papier making his first start alongside Handré Pollard and Keenan Moody, a number of other changes. Were you surprised by South Africa making so many changes after being so dominant last week?
Annoyed, if anything, because why couldn't they have put that squad out against us, kind of thing. But
well, it's not a bad squad, Dom, to be honest. I mean,
no,
it still beats probably most international top level sides.
Yeah, that's the frustrating thing, is that the team they still named is top draw. You really can't find a way to argue with it. But I don't know, maybe it's clearly Razzie making sure that, yes, he has his first team and he likes this and he's nurtured this and whatnot. But what he can't let happen is that, some of those big players start, dropping out all of a sudden for some odd reason. We'll never know. Then it's good that you give that second team a bit of a nurturing still, that they know what their roles are, they know how to play Razzie's game and execute it how he wants it to. Because otherwise, that's when he can start, picking and choosing players, to start taking people out, putting people in and bumping them up maybe into that first team, as I say. It's one that they'll still probably win with their second string team against Scotland, but equally, Scotland looked a lot better and they have still been improving. I mean, you compare their game against Argentina to what they had back in the Autumn Nations Championship, it is massively different. They're managing to see games out now and still cling on and still, fight for points right until the death. So, yeah, I think Scotland will give them a good run for the money, but I think it'll still be safe to say that South Africa are South Africa and will likely win again.
They'll be licking their lips, Scotland, a little bit, or they'll not be licking. I don't think you can lick your lips against South Africa, but they'll get a bit of a boost from it, Dom, for sure. I think you're right. I think South Africa they've still got just so much quality. I mean, you look across this whole. I think this is a typo on the Springboks website, because they've got Kobus Reinach lining up at lock, so I think that's a typo. But still, you look at that back row: Paul de Villiers, Peter Steph, du Toit, Evan Roos. That back line is just absolutely superb. Willemse, who was so good last week, he's coming in at 12, and it's a lot to take on for a Scottish side. But I think it's an opportunity as well for them just to have a free hit, Dom, because I don't think, even with all those changes, they're not really expected to win this one. Unlike the Six Nations, the expectations off, which is particularly so because of that result in Argentina. I don't think everyone expected them to win as comprehensively as they did, and I know the scoreline doesn't reflect that, but it was a lot of tries at the end for Argentina to sort of bring that gap up. And I think, despite not having Finn Russell, having someone like Tom Jordan in there, he's proven his weight in gold. And when you consider a couple of Scotland players who are not there, with Blair Kinghorn and Finn Russell, your more experienced players, I think it's very impressive what they went and done last week. And I think they'll fancy their chances and they'll give it a go for sure against the Springboks. But again, I'd sort of be aligned with you there. I think they'll just have a little bit too much for them. I think it'll be very very tight. I think it'll come down to about 5 points. But I fancy the Springboks for that one. It's sort of hard to not fancy them.
It's going to be a weird mental battle because, like you say, yes, it's not the best South African team, and therefore going into the game, Scotland wouldn't have thought themselves to win. But then you kind of get Scotland's hopes up by playing that second string team, and then it'll be interesting how they manage it mentally, whether they go in kind of thinking, oh, we've got this, or whether they're still a little bit more reserved. But it'll be very interesting. And what was interesting, especially, was how close Ireland and Australia came in over in the Allianz. How was your heart rate?
I was just a wee bit frustrated with the defence. The defence in the first half.
Did I read it was 38 missed tackles or something?
I think it was 31, but it was something like it was a record, like it was for Farrell in an opening half or something like that, or maybe even just in just general. I think it was a record, but Australia just brought the pepper, the cayenne pepper, and they just Carter Gordon at 10. He just side through, finding all these players on the outside as well. They seemed to really get through us, and it was a little bit concerning. But I think Ireland just sort of reverted to type, stuck in the game. Eventually, the Australian discipline sort of wilted a little bit, and then got over the line. But honestly, that Donaldson, I sort of thought he was going to kick it, to be honest, because I thought, but that's I haven't played rugby at any particular level brain. It's a tough kick. That probably your men like Lee Halfpenny and Damien McKenzie and your top level kickers in the world, they will hit those kicks. Sasha Feinberg and Gordon Zulu, he'll hit that kick. Lee Halfpenny would hit that kick back in the day. But I think that's where I think also Australia's struggle is, that they don't have that elite goal kicker. And I think when Donaldson stepped up, I think Harry Wilson says, you fancy it, or you definitely want it? Right, okay, let's go. And I rate that from Wilson, and he's done that a couple of times where he sort of backed his player's decision. And I think it is good leadership, and I think if he goes and slots that, then you're having a different conversation. But fair play to the Aussies. And they'll have a big test on this week, Don, against France. How do you fancy that one going? With maybe potentially a couple of French coming back into the fray from the top 14 final.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing, isn't it? That if France do have returning who they say they have, then it could be a very different story. But, I mean, France were very unlucky not to beat New Zealand, I thought. That was a game that really could have gone either way. It was one team goes and scores, and then the other comes back, and it's back and forth and yo-yo and all the time. And it was a brilliant way to kick off this tournament. And this rivalry in the last couple of years has become one that just is so exciting, and you never really know which way it's going to go. But this time it was advantage New Zealand. But when you look deeper and you look at who France were missing, you can kind of understand why. But I do just want to say Atis Ogbe has still got it. He is going to be one of the best.
Well, you'd hope so, given he's probably like, what is he, 21, 22, something like that.
You never know. Watching him in the Six Nations, I was like,
consistency,
It could. Was it just maybe a fluke? But absolutely not. Penaud back in a French jersey, scoring again. It was.
Yeah. Is that line that Jalabert cuts for that last try? That's his textbook. He just cuts across with such pace, and it's just it doesn't matter how he's got a good bit of power to him. He's no mushroom. But
it's not what
the pace that he goes at. His trickery is so hard to stop from that angle. I think just the bravery to take that line, and I think him and Luku, honestly, arguments. I know Dupont is absolutely unbelievable, but the synergy between those two, there's an argument to be made there. In certain games, you could definitely rely on those two to, that is an international standard. halfback pairing without a doubt. But yeah, I think if there is a couple of those boys that come back in, even if there's not, to be honest, I still sort of fancy the French for that one. Australia, they always give like really encouraging signs, and I think they have improved a lot under Joe Schmidt, particularly with their performance in the Rugby Championship last year. But I think just you looked at them in the autumn, they weren't quite firing the same. I just don't quite think they're at that level of the French, even with like the French were able to come from the end of a season. I know the New Zealand did the same, but he stepped into the cauldron against New Zealand in Christchurch, and they nearly won that game. If I know they were pushing it at the end, but I just fancy France. And I think they'll probably have a couple of boys coming back as well. Not Dupont, of course. But yeah, what about yourself? Who do you fancy for that one?
I wouldn't be against an Australia upset on the cards. I really wouldn't. Because I just think Australia they did play very well against Ireland, but it is that reoccurring thing that they just can't see it out. They just can't hang on to a lead, and they kind of take a step back and let them soak, but then they soak so much that then they end up conceding, and they're always just having to fight back, and it just seems tiring for them. But I think if I'm going to put my sensible head on, yes, actually France will wipe the floor with them. I don't think they'll have them on the wide areas because Peach and Jorgensen have been so good and really solidified those wings positions.
They got a lot of purchase in those wide areas, so it'll be interesting to see how they attack them against France.
Exactly. But no, I think Australia will definitely score a few, but it will be France doing their usual thing of kind of stand back, and then they'll just hit you when you least expect it. Whereas Australia will have to grind for every point they get. So, yeah, France are my winners.
Bit of a better defensive performance than Ireland from last week. Ireland, they actually don't have to go, well, the grand scheme of things, they don't have to travel country at least. They do have to go to Newcastle to face Japan, so that's another fixture. You fancy Ireland for that one, or do you think Japan can cause them some issues?
I think they'll cause issues, but they won't win it, kind of thing. I think Japan won against Italy because I think just the way that the seasons are worked, and a lot of Italian players come and play in the Prem or they play in the URC, so seasons are pretty freshly over. So there might have been a case of, okay, let's just give those guys who are returning a little bit of extra time, like your Stephen Varney's, your Ross Vincent, like he wasn't starting, but it was probably just an opportunity for them to let those guys breathe a little bit. It's only Japan.
Well, it was a fairly strong team, to be fair, Dom. I mean, there was, they had the standard centre partnership going on there. I think Japan, they put it on them for sure. I think there was probably the humidity is probably quite a big factor in that one.
It just didn't seem like the usual Italy of and maybe you're right. Maybe the altitude played into things a little bit more, and they just didn't look like they had much intent. Whereas Japan were almost running rings around them and played very well. Earning a bonus point win. But no, I think for Ireland this week it's a run of the mill performance. It is go there, get 5 points, and leave without having them do too much damage or opening too many wounds for them.
Yeah, and it's definitely an opportunity this week to not shuffle the pack too much, because Japan are a very good side in their own right and you want to secure the victory, but I think there is an opportunity there to bring some players in. But looking elsewhere, you've got obviously New Zealand. They'll have another home game against Italy. That one takes place for you early risers at 6:10 in the morning. So the early bird that gets the All Blacks in Italy. It was dreadful pun. But yeah, fancy any Italian remontada there against New Zealand?
No, I think this week will be a little bit more predictable. See, New Zealand being at home, France already discussed, Ireland we've discussed, England should be winning that, especially as it's technically at home over at Everton's ground. Again, South Africa should be run of the mill, but we've spoken that with the team they've got, it could be a chance for Scotland. And then Argentina, I think they'll be very bitter after losing last week at home again. And Wales, as I say, not looking as convincing as they have over in the Six Nations, but
so for on the Wales one, I actually think this is a very this one for me would be the one I'd look at apart from South Africa Scotland, because I think there's with the side that Springboks have picked there, I think it could be interesting there. But for Wales, on the back of that victory, 2 victories on the bounce, 3 if you count the Barbarians, we'll not count it because it's not technically the test match. With Argentina's loss last week in the manner that they did lose, would you be sniffing blood if you were Steve Tandy?
Yeah, I think you've got to poke the bear, make sure it's not completely dead before striking it again, but just be prepared that the bear might wake up and absolutely maul your face off. So
yeah, or the puma in this case.
Yeah, well, the puma in this case. But no, I think we know what Argentina are capable of. We know what the quality they have, and they should have done far better than they did against Scotland. But Scotland, credit to them, as we've said, just looked very good. That back line really firing on all cylinders, pretty full strength as well. So, it's impressive, and they look far better. But as I say, Argentina, yes, you make the point that Steve Tandy could be smelling blood, but I think Argentina will be smelling it themselves and realising, right, this is Wales we're talking about here. We can't be getting beat by them. So yeah, they'll be.
Yeah. Well, it'll be. Yeah, they won comprehensively in Cardiff when they went in the autumn. I think they'll look at that and they'll be fired up after that Scotland. I don't think Scotland have done Wales a favour here. There'll be some quite angry Argentinians looking to sink their teeth into some Welsh dragons. But yeah, I think it'll just be for if I was Welsh, I would say I wouldn't have the expectation of going over there and getting a victory. Potentially a bonus point somewhere. Maybe if they shipped a lot of tries last week, maybe a try bonus point or a losing bonus point. But I think it's about closing that gap. Rome wasn't built in the day. They have beat Italy, they have beat Fiji. They'll go and they'll try and beat Argentina as well. If they do, goodness, I think we'll think that they're a lot further ahead on their journey than we could have ever anticipated in this Nations Championship. But I think it's just that Argentina will have the bit between their teeth a little bit more this week. I do fancy them for that. But that rounds up our Nations Championship roundup. We're going to have another episode coming out later on in the week, where we'll be talking all things Junior World Championship with the under-20s. And we'll also, at the end of that episode, have a feature with England under-20 stars. I'll keep that under wraps. Who that is, well, you can find out in that episode. But thank you very much for watching.